Hey everyone, welcome to the People and Perks podcast, where each week we sit down with a employee benefits vendor to help you make the best decisions for your employees. I'm Sean, the founder of Perkwise, the UK's first employee benefits review platform.
And I'm Adam Bell, employee benefits consultant at Wingate Benefit Solutions. And today we're joined by Matt. And Matt, I was doing a little bit of LinkedIn stalking this morning before we jumped on this call. I would say that you are a serial entrepreneur. You started your first business in school, managed to get 250 grand of funding by the time you were 18 years old. And then I guess the rest of your career it spans over different companies and businesses that you've been involved in since then. So great to have you on. Thanks for coming along.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about that background, like how you got to where you are today.
Well, you're making me feel very old. Cheers, Adam. It's been a while. To be honest, mate, I just fell into it. It was one of those things. I had no interest at all in IT or business when I was younger, and I had an idea when I was about 17. Became a bit obsessed with it and thought, I know I could probably maybe build that. And luckily, raised the money and got into building my own businesses. And so I've been at the sharp end really of kind of tech enabled solutions all I've ever done. And as a result, you make every possible mistake, that's humanly possible you do, and you learn a lot. And obviously the whole world has changed. And the first business I had, we built apps, but before there was app stores existed. So like you kind of see how things evolve over time, but it's really exciting. It's a great place to be if you're creative, if you want to solve problems and have fun with it. So yeah, really love what I do. And for the last 7 years, I've been working on each person, which we'll cover off kind of what that does today as part of the discussion.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember when we spoke before, you said that you didn't expect to be an employee benefits provider when you in each person and businesses behind that. Like, how did that occur?
Yeah. So, I mean, probably like a lot of things in my career, it's been kind of timing and a bit of luck and, not necessarily having a grand plan. So 8 years ago, I built a reward scheme called ePoints, and the basic idea was things like Nectar points and other schemes that are out there, like they're very retailer specific. So you can't collect them everywhere and you can't kind of spend them on everything. And I thought, why don't we build something that does that? And luckily did. I had some good backing in terms of investment and built something that connected a consumer to kind of collect the same currency at thousands of different retailers and brands. And then the grand plan was we try and partner up with one of the supermarkets and have like a nectar of our own called ePoints. But I was at an event, got chatting to a big opticians chain that are massive in the UK, but big in Europe as well. And they just said they wanted a reward currency for their stores, and they're a franchise. And they said every time they sold contact lenses, they wanted to give a fiver to the store owner and the team. What they liked about ePoints was that you could spend it on pretty much anything. So whether that was a fridge freezer for the staff room or a TV for the, whatever room, they wanted, or they wanted to take the team out for dinner at Nando's. So we had all the retailers on board so you could redeem the points anywhere. Anyway, long story short, but like a lot of things, you say yes to things, you do a quick calculation. Is it going to be worth commercially bothering with? And the reality is, the world of corporates is huge and they spend a lot of money on sales initiatives, reward and recognition initiatives and all that sort of stuff. So it started out as a reward scheme that then became a corporate reward scheme that then evolved into a more of an employee focused kind of recognition reward. And then over the last few years, employee benefits. So we kind of wrapped it all together really, but we're still really like love the whole reward piece and recognition. We've spent a lot of energy and time making that quite compelling. So because there's a lot of providers in the market, a lot of employee benefits providers, but we more specialize in recognition, reward, and benefits.
And what would you say is like the main challenge that people are looking at when they're looking to get a platform like each person?
Well, it depends at which level you want to look at it. So I'd say the actual industry is hugely saturated. So there's like so many options for, if you're a HR buyer, there's so many people to look at. There's a lot of incumbents with very deep pockets and the regular people that have been in the industry forever and got a lot of visibility. So newer providers, I think, struggle maybe to get noticed. And then even when you find a provider and you like a provider, then actually probably the biggest challenge you'll get is employee engagement and uptake and usage of platforms as a whole, regardless of what it is really bloody difficult. Like, it's not a straightforward exercise. And because of the complexity in an organization, I think what most companies kind of underestimate is kind of the behavioral, political, and operational friction that comes with putting in systems, and just the gulf of difference between like a good launch and habitual use of a system, any system. So I'd say it's really complicated. It's definitely not straightforward. Any provider, us included, there's no silver bullet. It just doesn't, you can't land something, it'll just work. It requires a huge amount of coordination between the actual, the business itself that are adopting the solution internally. You know, lots of different strands to it, but say employee engagement is just a big challenge.
I'm quite curious. Thanks so much for the intro. I'm quite curious when businesses are coming to you, like what is the problem that they're trying to solve for their employees?
So there's some more established businesses have solutions in place, right? So if you've got more than a few thousand employees, you'll have some form of recognition program, some form of reward, some form of employee benefits. And depending on how much you've invested in that over time, you'll either have one of our competitors and you'd be kind of have something in place, or you might have built sort of internal systems that possibly don't talk to each other, that maybe are a bit clunky, and you're kind of thinking, well, we want to consolidate into a platform. And then you got a lot of SMEs out there that just don't have anything in place. So depending on who you're talking to, really, the challenge is different. I'd say if what we see a lot of the time is if you've been with one of the big providers for a number of years, and they're not all the same, but there is a kind of level of stagnancy out there where the platforms haven't really moved on very much over time. And a lot of our competitors have been bought by private equity, or they're consolidated with bigger organizations that aren't innovating very much. And in the world of AI, like, you should be innovating more than ever at the moment. So actually, we see a huge opportunity to move fast, quickly, listen to customers in order to be kind of front of that. But they're probably grappling with the scenario. If you're a bigger company, we've had this in place for 10 years. It's got all right engagement. No one really loves it. In our employee survey, you probably get the feedback that, we don't get access to a lot of benefits, when the reality is they will. So the employer will give them loads of stuff. Doesn't matter who the vendor in the actual platform is. So there's a big discrepancy between what people really have on offer to them as part of their kind of EVP versus what they think. And yeah, the organization's then got a question to ask themselves, and it is a real question: is, do we try and fix that? Do we move to something new, or do we just try and tweak and improve what we've already got? And fortunately for us, we've over the last few years attracted a lot of enterprise customers that have moved from the bigger players. So we've learned really what we have to do to enable that transition, because it's moving from something old to new. Again, is not easy. In fact, it's easier if you had nothing in the first place, to be fair, because there's no expectation, there's no integrations with other systems. So we get a lot of that, and that's one type of challenge. And then you've got the kind of the other hand, where people just don't really have anything, and they have to decide what are they trying to solve. Is it an attraction challenge they've got in terms of, like, how do they get people into the business, and what does it look like in terms of that kind of overall package they deliver? Is it retention? And obviously retention very linked with the actual levels of productivity and engagement in a business. Are they grappling with issues around inclusion, that then maybe not, they want to be inclusive as an employer, they want to be seen to be inclusive, but they're actually not. And there's lots of groups of people that maybe are overlooked. So these sorts of tools, not just ours, but employee engagement, recognition, reward, benefits, they can all play a really powerful role in helping organizations attract the right people, keep the ones they want to keep, build that culture. But again, it's easier said than done. And as I said at the very beginning, there is no just like drop in a tool and it's going to make that happen. Any system that you put in place is really just a reflection of the culture that's there in the first place. And if the culture's in the mud, then you're not going to get much out of investing in a platform unless you can solve some of that that cultural stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it comes back to what you said around engagement, doesn't it? That, like, if you put any system or platform in place, any benefit in place, you want people to engage with it. But it's not just a case of saying to people, here's the new shiny platform, off you go, and hope you're going to get a load of good engagement. What would you say, what advice would you give a business in terms of if they want to get good engagement, how do they go about that?
So that's a massive topic, right? So there's various strands to it. I'd probably always start with, internal comms. So internal comms is, for me, it's the adoption engine, but also it's the blocker to getting something, taken up. Because you got to think that, well, we know, and you hear this, even when we win a new client, we hear this stuff about the incumbent they've already got, and they'll say, well, it's got poor adoption. And it might, but you've got to look at why. Why has it not got the adoption? Is it being repeatedly signposted in the right trusted channels or not? Because if it isn't, again, it's tough then if you're not kind of telling employees, this is where you need to find this, and this is the value for you. So there's kind of an internal comms alignment piece and the big question of what's that value exchange for the employee to bother in the first place. So I think they're very, very connected. But internal comms is one of those areas that we spend a lot of time with. So we kind of got some insight into. And at first, I felt like, if we're really honest, that internal comms sometimes were just like creating a barrier for the sake of justifying kind of their roles. But I don't believe that anymore. So internal comms people that might be listening, please don't hate me for saying that. What I've learned is they are the gatekeeper. They need to be to employees because we are all bombarded. There was some research I read the other day that apparently employees are interrupted every 2 minutes at work, which actually I tested the theory. I was in the office yesterday, and you do like, there's this report. It was a work trend in annual index report 2025. They were saying you get on average 275 interruptions a day, which is just a shed load of like noise. So if you're an internal comms lead, you are going to be protective of like not wanting to over communicate and kind of look after people that way. But we also do see the politics at play sometimes as well, of like there's a bit of not always, but a bit of a power struggle between the HRD and the comms director, or the teams that are responsible for those things. Who's more senior, who gets to decide. And again, big lesson we've learned, you need to bring the comms teams with you on any implementation from the beginning. Don't wait until you've procurement have appointed someone and then go, comms, here you go, here's the new thing, here's the new flavor of the month, because they'll have thousands of things to contend with. And then this just becomes another thing you layer in on top of them, and they're going to put the barriers up. So I'd say, yeah, it does. Success often does come down to kind of the internal comms buy-in far more. And if you don't get it, it's just a procurement tick box thing to put in a system. We did it. You're not going to get the usage. So we always say, bring internal comms with you from the beginning, agree with them in partnership with them, a decent comms strategy that's fair on the employees and it's not over the top, but it gives enough visibility. But also you can personalize anything now. Let the employees decide what they want to be told about and how. That's not difficult anymore. It used to be, but it's not hard. So let them decide what, do they want emails? Do they want Slack messages? Is it push notifications or text messages? Is it none of the above? What frequency? So we've extended the profile of each person massively recently to give really granular control down to the employee. And we've seen such good uptake and usage of that feature. And people aren't just turning it all off. They're just being selective about what they want to hear about. So I'd say, yeah, they're the kind of key takeaways. But I think if you don't get the internal comms bit right at the beginning, then you are up against it, and it's going to be a massive uphill struggle really to get anything away.
Yeah, I agree. And personalization is the big one as well, isn't it? Like that's the big change we've seen in the last couple of years in terms of across how benefits are provided. It's businesses want to be able to personalize. And that example you've given there of just giving people choice of how they want to receive the information over time is like, it plays such a big part, doesn't it? Because you're almost giving your consent to receive the information and to engage with it because it's on your term.
Yeah, I mean, it's called employee engagement. So you're asking for their interaction and their permission. So I'd say it's a big part. But then we had a recent experience that made me think a bit broader about the topic of comms. So a really big client we launched with not too long ago, and we started getting pushback from their cybersecurity team, which we've never really dealt with cybersecurity teams that much. As long as you're compliant, like you don't really have much involvement from them. But actually, their point was so valid. What they said is they spend so much time and energy as an organization telling their employees not to open emails from third party providers or from third parties in general because of phishing, right? They drill it into people all the time. Then you got HR and internal comms saying open emails from these guys because it's to do with your benefits, right? It's not a good fit. So we changed things in partnership with them. Again, at first we thought, why are you being difficult? There's no issues with spam, blah, blah, blah. But actually, when you really understand it from their point of view, they're not being difficult. There's a big Verizon report that came out this year. It was all about data breaches. And it is called the Data Breach Report 2026, worth a read. But they were saying that of all data breaches in organizations, 60% involve the people that work there. And the big growing trend is, and this has changed in the last couple of years, it was 15% of these breaches involve third parties. It's now 30%. So of breaches in organizations, 30% relate to the supply chain of people and systems you put in place. So I totally see why this particular partner would really like, we don't want you sending emails. So we don't. The emails come from them now. So we now, with any of our clients, they can switch that across so that it comes from their domain. It's a trusted source, and they can continue to bang the drum that don't open any emails from third parties because suddenly we're not a third party anymore. It's been sent from them. So I'd say, can't work against the security policy because you're never going to get anywhere with it. And it makes sense because the risk is real. If people make a mistake, click on something they think is a reward statement or something, and then they got some malware in their network, then that's a real cost and a pain. So it relates to comms, but this is more the security side and just protecting the workforce.
In addition to comms, is there also an onus on the employees? I know you talked before about like culture, but for something with like reward and recognition, like it involves a lot of participation on the employee side as well, and that comes down to the culture. If people feel comfortable, go through like reward and recognition programs with their peers, like, do you think it's also down to the employees to be part of it as well?
I do, but I actually think there is more of an onus on the senior people in organizations to set the tone. So we have a lot of clients of ours in hospitality, and we've got two big restaurant chains, similar size, and the engagement's good in both, but it's great in one and it's good in the other. And that is largely down to the fact that the CEO, the HRD, all the C-suite people in that business recognize and reward people publicly, frequently. It's really authentic. So we've got features like you can do a voice note. Instead of just sending a message, you can do a voice note. So actually hearing them speak, the recognition, and everyone in the organization can listen to that. It's really powerful. And there are obviously other businesses where they're just being told what to do, and the senior people aren't role modeling it. And it feels like, I've got two kids, right? So sometimes I'm very guilty of this. It's like, yeah, do as I say, not do as I do type stuff. And yeah, people can see through that, and they're like, why would I bother really? I've got loads on, very busy. Suddenly they don't see the point of something if they're just being told to do it. And the more kind of visible leadership people aren't doing the same themselves. So that's a real challenge, right? Because as any supplier, you can't, or you can encourage, but you can't necessarily change that. If their senior people just want a system to tick a box, then what can you do? You can just do your best to make sure that the other things like user experience and things like that are great for the actual end user. But and we do see it often, and most of our customers do invest in this area because it's a genuine thing, an extension of their brand and the culture they want to create. But then the employees see it and the employees do it, but you can build on that. So we've got additional things to make it more fun for employees, like gamification, leaderboards, badges, all that sort of stuff, which you can take something that, if you can scratch the surface of recognition and it can feel quite transactional and quite dull, or you can make it fun. We had this, someone said to us a while back, Moonpig's really fun. You can create your own cards, right? So we have the same capability. Like the employee can be really creative, design their own cards. And some of our companies don't actually want that feature enabled, so we'll turn it off. They're worried that people may be too creative and do things that maybe don't want to be publicly shared. In particular, we work in the NHS a lot, so there's a bit of that in public sector organizations. But you can make it fun for the employees, but unless it feels authentic and real and part of the genuine fabric of the company, then it just becomes another one of those things that you'll get a silo and you'll get some people gravitate towards it. Other people can't be asked.
And on that, so when we talk about culture and when we talk about these platforms like yours landing and getting that engagement because leadership are modeling those behaviors, like have you got any advice for, let's say, a HR leader who is looking at something like each person or a reward and recognition platform of some sort, and they know that actually their leadership aren't bought in? Do you have any advice for them, or do you do anything at the moment in terms of, I don't know, a business case to help show those leaderships the value of having that sort of thing in place?
Absolutely. I think if you've got that challenge, the only way you can overcome it is by demonstrating the return on investment and showing whether that's measuring the actual ultimate churn, depends on the challenge you've got. Whether that's using surveys to measure actual engagement and positivity, employee net promoter score. But if you back it up with data, then you've got a really compelling case. There's also another argument for systems like ours. If you take employee benefits as an example, you can introduce a salary sacrifice scheme. And if you're an employer who's got a few thousand employees, with the national insurance and pension savings, you might save 200 grand a year on modest levels of uptake on a sales tax scheme like electric vehicle or cycle to work. So it comes down to who you're trying to convince, really. If it's the CFO, then it's obviously the financial argument. A platform like this can save us hundreds of thousands of pounds. Bit of a no-brainer. If it's leadership that kind of don't get the need for recognition, then I think it's a conversation about employee engagement as a whole. Gallup just did a big report on the state of employee engagement globally, the cost to the global economy of $10 trillion a year it costs in terms of lack of productivity. So it's a lack of employee engagement relating to productivity. So there's so much evidence out there to show that, engaged teams are more profitable teams and inclusive organizations are more profitable organizations. There's so much evidence that I would just focus it on that and just say, look, these are the tools that can enable our strategy. They don't dictate our strategy, they just enable it. We see ourselves as an enabler of kind of what HR people want to do in their business, and it is highly specific to the organization, even if they're in the same sector. So yeah, the business case, and we often will support, and we're lucky enough to work and have kind of advisory board members of really senior people in the industry. Chairman of the EAP Association is one of those. So we'll bring some of our partners and advisors into meetings and calls to help clients really get across the need to do things. And they're more expert than we are. Or me in particular, we try and enable it and build it. We don't know it all. So it's like you have to lean on the experts.
Can you talk a bit about more about each person and how the platform works? And you mentioned there's reward recognition, but then also an employee benefits lens to it as well. Yeah, if you could talk a bit about that.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, I mean, it's probably worth explaining just the way it evolved. So we started doing just recognition and reward, really fixated on that. In large organizations, obviously, it's hard to land, recognition and reward and make it part of the culture. So there's lots of, kind of engagement things you have to put into place, branding and kind of tailoring of the rules. So what we learned early doors really is you can't build, even though it's a SaaS, you can't build a one size fits all because every company is really, really different. And it's a deal breaker. Some of the minor things are deal breakers. So, we had to build capability around internal nominations programs as an example. Trivial things like employee of the month can be highly complicated depending on the organization. So we've had to build this engine really that can be configured by the customer to meet the way they want things to work. How do they want it to flow? Do they want it to be highly public? Do they want it to be some social recognition, but largely private? Do they want rewards? So customers then can put reward budgets into the platform and give managers their own kind of autonomy to spend company money, give that to employees. But the alternative maybe is an expense claim, which you don't really know where things end up. So we've built a lot of system stuff around a real audit trail for how people recognize each other, reward each other, where, when, and why, and a lot of analytics really under the hood to help you understand the performance. Because again, you can just throw features at people, but unless you understand how it's behaving and why, it's a bit pointless. So that's where we started. And as we've evolved, we got more and more bigger customers saying to us, well, what about employee benefits? And that really falls into three categories. So you've got your kind of mental well-being. So that's your counseling services, your support network, whether it's a GP service, so it's like health and well-being. You've got financial. So how do we save people money? How do we stretch their pay further? And we do a huge amount in that area. We're probably the most generous cashback scheme on the market, and include every brand and retailer because of where we started. Because in the very early days, we started as a reward program. We've now got 4,500 retailers in 46 countries. So we're now global as a provider as well. So there's the financial side, and then there's the physical side. So how do you, obviously there's loads of evidence to show that a healthy, physically active workforce is a more productive and less absenteeism. So it's about bringing together for us the best of breed benefits. Some of them we deliver ourselves, some we do through a network of trusted partners. But then again, it has to be highly personalized and relevant. So we've done a lot of work for the organization to shape who gets access to what at one level and how it works at one level. But then the employee ultimately is the most important participant in this. So they've got to have the control and the personalization and the relevance. So we've evolved. And I suppose with the advent of AI and the ability to move really quickly, we've added things that I never thought we would build, like employee listening and survey engagement surveys. And again, you can do an amazing job at that now, rather than it being just a bit of a sideline thing, just because you are in a world where you can build anything. And as long as you know what you're building and you connect it together in the right way, you can move pretty rapidly. So I'd say, yeah, that's been our evolution over the last 6 months. We've started to think about this, or I've started to think about this slightly differently, because there's loads of perks providers. You'll know this, Sean, better than anyone. Loads of perks out there, but actually, for me, it's more about the culture behind where you work, and how do we facilitate great culture. The bit that's lacking, I'd say, and it's part of a global backdrop as well, really, of what's happened on the world stage, is inclusion and that EDI piece. I think it's not had a front seat for a long time. And I think with recognition in particular, but also benefits, how you speak to people, how you treat people, we've got a great opportunity, I believe, to help companies actually manage inclusion at scale and manage inclusion globally. There's kind of a general feedback we get is HR teams, comms teams are actually pretty afraid of the topic, because it is quite a highly charged topic, and there's a fear of getting it wrong. And if you kind of don't maybe celebrate the right occasion, or if you celebrate the wrong way, are you going to end up in a tribunal situation? Are people going to be more unhappy than not doing it? So a lot of people just, as a result, sit on their hands. And there's so many EDI managers, D&I directors, whatever the titles are, that don't really have great products and solutions to pick from. So our kind of strategy is evolving to kind of look at this in the round and think, well, yes, we do recognition, we do reward, we do benefits, but how do we do that in a way that helps organizations be more equitable to their people and give them real tools that they can use to drive that and analyze that? So there's so much attention on the gender pay gap, as an example, rightly so. But if you think about diversity and inclusion, there's so many aspects and nuances that you could look at and you could start to analyze in your organization if you had the data and if you had the tools. So I'd say that's the next phase for us. We've started and we're doing some great work with a fantastic guy in the industry called Wush Raza, Into the Orbit, who's a partner and actually a friend as well now. We've got to work together. Had a lot of fun doing this because, as I said at the beginning, we're not experts in all these areas. So we'd rather partner with an EDI expert that's all they ever do. We build the tools and we work with our clients to kind of solve problems. So that's the short history of the evolution. But as a result, it's employee engagement as a whole that we're now very much in the middle of. And depending on the type of organization, whether it's public or private, whether they're looking at financial or physical or mental, the flavor of our platform will be distinctly different. It isn't, here's each person, just run with it. That's not the way we work. So highly kind of personalized. And I think that's the only way you get the engagement, really.
Yeah, it's a great point. And you touched on a few interesting bits there. I remember, I think it was the CEO of a restaurant chain wrote a article. And one of the things that's always stuck with me is the ROI of a thank you was one of the comments that he gave. And it's so true, isn't it? Because when you go back to some of the features you've got in terms of like voice notes and stuff like that, to hear a leader within an organization say thank you to someone, in their own voice, without just a one line Teams message or something to say thanks for that. The impact of that is huge, and the impact that that can have on employee satisfaction, engagement, retention, all of the drivers that HR teams and finance teams care about. And that's, I think, huge for all organizations. You kind of took the next question out of my mouth in terms of like what next. You touched on the ED&I piece, which actually is really interesting, because I completely agree with you in terms of organizations do tend to sit on their hands a little bit, not because they don't want to do something. It's just that fear, isn't it, of what happens if. So that's an interesting piece. I mean, on that, I guess, is there anything else that you're working on, or in a couple of years, where do you see each person or the industry, I guess, like what are you seeing, what are you thinking is going to come next?
Yeah, so maybe it's better to talk about the industry actually, rather than just to make it all about each person. I think what we've seen and continue to see is disruption, and we're part of that. We're trying to be disruptive, not just to be disruptive, but because it's there to be disruptive, to be disrupted, I should say. And what we're going to see more and more of is consolidation. The big boys are buying each other and trying to merge and all that sort of stuff, and that's all happening. And there are new exciting players that are very AI driven, data first. We've not really talked about data. So that's one of the things actually in terms of engagement challenges we see a lot of is crap data. If the data is poor in the HR system or payroll system or whatever, then it's just a source of constant frustration for employees. And eventually you just give up. You go, oh, I can't be bothered to reset my password again, or the single sign-on didn't work, or I'm in the wrong place, I've been deactivated. And all these things our support team have to grapple with. So I do feel for them, but 9 times out of 10, it's one of the HR systems, and I won't name them, but there's a very popular one that has a lot of problems in that area. But what can you do? So I'd say consolidation is going to be a big thing, and rapid kind of evolution of this space. What we'll see in the next 3 to 5 years are that none of the platforms that are there will resemble the ones today. Not one, ours included. So anybody that thinks, oh, they're fine for a couple of years, they're totally mistaken. They're not. We're building things now in 2 weeks that used to take us 6 months or more, and we can do it in 2 weeks without it distracting. So you can be, the kind of disruption factor is going to be enormous. I'd say the thing that the industry is going to grapple with for the next year or two before it becomes really clear, and maybe never will be sorted fully, is data and security and privacy. And, that's going to be something that slows innovation, I'd say. And that's why we've not tried to jump on the bandwagon to say, well, we're an AI, blah, blah, right? We use AI. Of course we do. Everyone does. But there is a real risk of just trying to get on that bandwagon when you're dealing with, such an important asset, which is the people of an organization. You can't just be kind of reckless with how you look after their data, what systems you give access to their data, just because as a provider we want to move quickly. There's going to be a huge amount of change. I would imagine that half the platforms that are out there today will not be around in 5 years' time, because they just will miss how quickly it's going to move. Hopefully we know how quickly it's going to move. We're going to move with it, but there's no guarantees, because there's sort of room for disruption, I think, in every aspect of HR tech. And even though you see a lot of people saying we're AI native and AI whatever, they're not, because they weren't built today. The ones that are being built now by the right people, they're the ones that are going to disrupt. So constantly reinventing yourself, I'd say, is the kind of key thing, and making sure that you're not only moving really rapidly, but you become, as a provider, the solution that the HR leader, the HR team, and the employee are voting for. Where they're voting for the way they engage, with the way they talk about things, and providing you kind of reflect what they need, and you're constantly keeping up with that ever-changing need, then you stand yourself in good stead. So some of it is kind of a little bit of guesswork, I'd say, if you'd be really honest, right? You make bets on where you think, not where it is today, but where you think it's going to go. Where we've been, I think it's continued to keep us at the forefront is really listening to those ideas from top sort of experienced, aggressive HR leaders. And you spend time with them, and they kind of go, I've always wanted a system that could do X. And they come up with the most really difficult thing you can imagine, because they've never had it before. And then you just have to obsess on that idea, and you think, well, how do we do that? Or even just how do we take steps to move in that direction? We've got a vision for where we see the more equitable workplace landing, but that's not what we've built yet. We've built some stuff to get us into that area. So, and I think providing you're always moving forward and you're really self-critical, which I am, we are, we're kind of never going to be happy with the platform. We've got one particular competitor that, if you look at their website, is literally just like our website, because what we do is we drop something new and then it gets copied. And they'll always be 6 months to a year behind us. So that's, for me, it's flattering, because they're obviously seeing us as someone to try and keep up with. But there are other providers in the market that we really admire and we look at, and they're not necessarily doing what we do, but we think the way they've done that, the way they've delivered it, is really good. Why, how can we take some of those learnings and put it into the stuff we do? And then it's constantly measuring it, not measuring it for the sake of having loads of dashboards or reports, but like measuring it to make sure that every day, every week, you are just gradually nudging it forward and getting a bit better. And everyone talks about a moat with SaaS. What's your moat? It's the moat is how good it is, because yes, we know you can build stuff really quickly, but it's the detail, and the devil's in the detail, and you can't just AI that. You have to become really, really deep subject matter experts in the thing you do, and you need to understand, as a HR team, but also as a procurement team and as a finance decision-making engine and as an organization, what are all the points that can go wrong, and what are all the points of friction? And you have to just be chipping away at those. And you can't automate that. You have to have real people, that live and breathe it and do nothing else, and that becomes their life. And as I said earlier, you then partner with the people that you think are going to come with you on that journey, and you want to help them as much as they want to help you. And we've got that in abundance, which is great. And finally, you've got to enjoy it. You got to have fun. We could all choose to do whatever, career wise and industry wise, lots of different things. Obviously, with global working, you can work anywhere nowadays. If you don't have fun doing what you do, then do something else. So we're enjoying it. Yeah,
that's awesome. And I guess everything you've just said, it just goes to show, especially at the way the market is progressing, the need to find the right providers, and to find those providers and solutions that are forward-thinking, progressive, and disruptive. Because ultimately, like you say, if you're partnering with a platform, whether it's each person or something else, you want to have that longevity. You don't want to have to then review it in 2 to 5 years and change it again and again and again. You want something that's going to grow with you and give you the tools you need, whether it's reward, recognition, engagement, to help you grow as a business as well. Final question for you, Matt. So if you're, imagine I'm a HR or finance leader. What's the one thing you would want them to take away when it comes down to whether it's reward, recognition, engagement, just from today?
I suppose it comes down to, what are you trying to achieve? And if you're really clear on what you want to achieve and there's alignment in your business, then I'd say my advice is there's loads of great options out there. Make sure you do your homework and you compare and contrast. If you've got an existing supplier in place, don't just kind of live with the reports they give you. Really challenge the actual habitual usage of whatever you've got in place. It's not just about what percentage of registered. That's such a lovely stat people quote. And we've got clients 100% registered rate. Let's just put our feet up and we never have to do any work with them again, right? No, it doesn't mean anything if people don't use it and if people don't value it. So force your supplier to give you that information so you can make considered choices. And the world's your oyster. So if you've got an imagination, most people have, and you want it to do X, Y, and Z, you're in a world where anything is genuinely possible and any supplier can build anything. So, get it to be built the way you want it to be built, and tailored to your, all the idiosyncrasies of your organization, because every company's different, and anyone who tells you no, it can't be done, it's just, they're just talking nonsense. It can be. So that would be my main advice.
Awesome. And great point to end on. And like you say, most organizations, they're different. Individuals are different, and it's about finding those solutions and providers that can support you in driving good engagement and helping those business outcomes. But it's been really good chatting to you, Matt. Really, really great podcast. For anybody listening, if you want to learn more about each person, feel free to reach out to Matt, or if you need support with your benefits, we're here at Wingate, or you can head over to the PerkWise website for more info too. But thanks very much for listening. And Matt, great to have you on.
Thanks, guys.
We'll see you all again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Cheers, guys. Take care.
Cheers. Bye.